No. It's 71B. Yeah, 71B, bottom of the page. So yesterday we were in the middle of a discussion about shlichus la'akum. What does that mean? Can you appoint a non-Jew as an agent? Now, one of the key concepts of being an agent is what we call shlucha shel adam k'maaseh. It's as if the agent has done your action. Asked, he says, why can't I appoint somebody to put on tefillin for me? Imagine it'd be quite a lucrative business. So he explains, he says, you could. If let's say I appoint the Jules to be my messenger to put on tefillin, it's like I put tefillin on you. Because it's not the action that's required, it's that you actually wear the tefillin. So it's true that I could represent an action by you doing it. Mm-hmm. Meaning by you being my agent, you're doing my action. Fine. So I'm putting on tefillin on you, but it doesn't solve the problem, which is that I have to put on the tefillin. We call this category a mitzvah shebegufay. Any mitzvah that involves your own specific body, like taking a lulav, putting on tefillin, eating in a sukkah, etc., you can't appoint the messenger because it's not the specific action, but it's that you have to be involved in the action. So the action has to occur to you. But in a non-mitzvah shebegufay, like taking off truma, right? You don't have to actually. The truma has to be taken off. It has to be your action, but you can appoint the messenger who represents your action. And similarly, in many categories, and one of the categories we were discussing was the issue of ribbis. Can a Jew appoint a non-Jew to serve as a messenger, as a representative agent to reissue or authorize a loan? And the same thing is true of whether a non-Jew can authorize a Jew to give out a loan on his behalf. That was a question that we dealt with yesterday. Okay, 1 second. Okay, now we're 3 lines in the bottom of the page. Last word on the line. Ravina Omar. It's now second to bottom line of 71b. Ravina Omar. It's true that a non-Jew cannot act as a representative, meaning, again, the key component here is kamaisei. Can you be him? Under Jewish law, a Jew acting as an agent, a shliach of another Jew, is doing action on behalf. The action is considered connected to the one who sent him. With a non-Jew, that's not the case. That's not the case. However, zechia midrabanan islay. However, the law of zechia applies, just like it midahava akotan, just like it applies to a kotan. What's the law of zechia? Zechia means you can acquire something on his behalf, and he can acquire something on your behalf. Just like a child. A child cannot be a shliach. He's also excluded from the category of shlichos. He cannot serve as an agent. However, the rabbis still say that you can acquire on his behalf and he can acquire on your behalf. Similarly, with a non-Jew, you can acquire things on his behalf and he can acquire things on your behalf. There shouldn't be a difference. And the Gemara says, well, there is a difference. It's not true. A Jewish child, he is of the type that could be a shliach. It's just right now he's not ready for it. It's immature. But a non-Jew will never be a shliach. So therefore, you can't directly compare them. It could be that the law of zechia was instituted specifically for Jewish children and cannot necessarily be applied to non-Jews.
A child could be a shliach.
A child could do zechia, and you can do zechia for a child. Zechia means if I see something on the street, I want to acquire it for you.
Oh, okay.
Now we explained in the past, there's 2 types of zechia. There's a schus and a chayv. So, for example, I can't pick up somebody else's parking ticket and give it to you, right? Because that's a chayv. That's not something you quite want, right? But if I do see a wallet on the street and presumably there's a winning lottery ticket in it or $100 or something, and I presume that you might be interested in that, then I could acquire it to you under the law of zachan. Yeah. By the way, if you're in front of me, then both work. you can authorize me to pick up a parking ticket for you as well, or somebody else's parking ticket for that matter. Meaning, if you're present and you say,
in front, yeah, okay.
you're on the bench, you're sitting on the bench, you're like,
Oh,
do you mind going over and picking up? I don't want this guy to get a parking ticket. I'll take it. Just bring it over to me. Both ways would work. Okay, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Yisrael Shalom Moisman Anochi Beribis, Vizok from Olav Milva. Okay, so what happens here? A Jew lends money to a non-Jew. I lent money to John, and we agreed that I would pay John 10% a year. So it comes 3 years later, and I owe him whatever, $130 and a little bit of change there. Vinizgayer, and then John converts and becomes a Jew. Now, so we did was we converted this money, the $130 I owe him, into a loan. It's as if a new loan was given for the amount of $130. So here's the key point. 1 second. Yeah. If we converted the $130 into a loan, into a new loan, before he converted, he collects principal and he collects interest, because a non-Jew is permitted to loan money to a Jew with ribis. However, if it was after he converted, that he converted the loan to the ribis, so he proselytized himself, okay, and then after that he said, you know what, you owe me 100 plus 30, let's turn it into one big loan. So then goyves a karen ve'ena goyves a ribis, you collect the principal and you do not collect the interest.
He's converted into one big loan, he's collecting.
I'm sorry?
He converted into a loan, so in fact he is.
See, but he converted after he proselytized.
Okay.
So now he's a Jew,
Okay.
and now he has to collect 100 plus 30. He says, you know what? Let's turn it into one big loan. You have another year to pay me. At the end of the loan, he wants the full 130.
He pays it. Okay.
So he doesn't get the 130. He only gets 100 because the $30 is an interest
Right,
payment,
interest.
and when the 100 plus 30 was turned into a loan of 130, that was sort of prohibited because now it's Jew to Jew. He's already proselytized.
Okay.
If it was before he proselytized, so then it's perfectly legitimate. You owe a non-Jew $130. There's no reason. There's nothing wrong with that. And then he proselytized. Well, now you still owe him $130. Why not? Similarly, in the reverse. Let's say you have a non-Jew that lends money from a Jew. And then it turns into, they change the relationship from an interest-bearing loan to an interest-free loan. They call it a gemach loan. Gemach is short for gemilas chasadim, or acts of kindness, right? Very often in a lot of communities, I believe in here as well, the Federation has a free loan society. The Hebrew word, they often call these gemach, a gemach. Okay. And by the way, let's just point out once we're on the subject, it's an interesting recommendation we can have here. It's an interesting story of a wagon driver. He met with the Chafetz Chaim, Yisrael Meir Kagan, famous for his book, of course, known by the same name, Chafetz Chaim, and also for writing a book called Mishnah Brura, written by the same person. And he gets his ride from a wagon driver, and the wagon driver is talking to him, and he's just a wagon driver, and he's a very simple person, and he is very, very busy, as you might imagine. He's a wagon driver. So he says to the rabbi, he says, Rabbi, he says, like, I barely have time to daven. I daven often while I'm, hitting the horses, basically. And I barely have any time to learn. He's like, what could I do to like sort of get myself a portion of the world to come? He's like, what type of mitzvah can I do that I'll be able to have the time to do? Because right now, all I'm doing the whole day is driving wagons and I barely have time for anything. So the rabbi said to him, this is very simple. He says, what you do is, you collect your fares, take a small percentage of your fares, 5%, and start giving out small loans. Start giving out small loans, and then eventually you'll have a whole bunch of money going out in small loans, and you'll fulfill a tremendous mitzvah of kesef talva, of lending a Jew when he needs the money. So indeed, that's what he did, and according to the story, which allegedly is true, A couple of years later, he had this privilege of giving the Chofetz Chaim a ride again, and at that point, he had, quite a large sum of money, all of it dedicated to going out in small loans for small periods of time, or gemach loans, free loans. Okay. And his guy are imach and his guy are zakvanol b'milva gova as a karen v'gova as a ribis. Okay, once again, imach and his guy are zakvanol b'milva. So if he converts the loan, so again, the non-Jew borrows from the Jew with ribis. He converts the loan before he converts. So then gova as a karen v'gova as a ribis. He collects both of them. He collects the large loan that was turned into a loan, one large free loan before he converted. However, imish and his guy are zakvanol b'milva. If he converts after the loan, if he turns the loan with interest into a large free loan after he converted, so then govas a karen ve'ena govas a ribis, you collect only the principal and not the interest. However, Rabbi Yossi says no. Nachrish lov mois b'Yisrael, lov mois b'Yisrael b'ribis, benkach govas a karen ve'govas a ribis. Rabbi Yossi says that in this case, because it is a non-Jew borrowing money from a Jew and converting to Judaism, therefore we require him to pay back in full both the principal and the ribis. What's the reason for this? Because we do not want any non-Jew to have a financial incentive to convert. In general, obviously, Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. To the contrary, if anything, to the contrary, it doesn't. It's not quite the tradition from the story of Naomi and Rus, which we'll read in Shavuos, and later codified in Talmud and Yevamos, is that we discourage conversion. So this is one of the ways we discourage it. Now let's be clear here. If this was biblical ribis, it doesn't make a difference. You can't permit biblical ribis just because you want to discourage conversion. So it's going. This is not biblical ribis. Why? Because biblical ribis is ribis ketzutza. What does that mean? It has to be set at the time of the loan. At the time of the loan, the setting of this ribis was perfectly permitted. There's nothing wrong. He was a non-Jew. And therefore, you're allowed to, there's nothing wrong with collecting ribis. It's rabbinical because any interest for a loan, even if it's not set, is rabbinical. And in this case, it'd be rabbinical. And the rabbi suspended it to create to make sure that there's no financial incentive for people to convert. Amar of Chizda, Amar of Huna, Halacha Rav Yossi, the halacha follows the opinion of Rav Yossi. Amar of my time, Rav Yossi, Kadesh LaYomer, B'Shvam Mois, Nisgai Arzeh. So people shouldn't say that he's converting because of money. Tanar Rabbanan, Shtar Shekaisin Ribis, Kain Sinaisev, Ein Agayva Lois Karen, Velois Ribis. So here's a big one. Div Rameir. Rameir's opinion is that if you have a document where you charge ribis ketzutza, biblically prohibited ribis, then not only can you not collect the ribis, you also can't collect the principal. It's a penalty. Now, by the way, there's a taisus here, the second to bottom taisus. It's important. It's worthwhile to note this taisus on the practical side. Generally speaking, the halacha follows Reb Meir whenever he makes a gezerah, he makes an additional decree. However, this is not constituted gezerah. This is called a knas, a penalty. And the halacha does not follow Reb Meir when he gives out penalties. So there's no penalty. So the halacha would not follow Reb Meir. But Kamma follows the rabbi's opinion. What's that? Govas a karen, v'eni govas a ribis. You collect the principal, not the interest. The ma'ikam ifgi. What's the debate? Reb Meir savar kansinan hatera mishum isura. We penalize that which is permitted because of that which is prohibited. For Rabbanan Savri and the rabbis say, like kansinan hatera mishum isura. We do not penalize that which is permitted because there's a prohibition connected to it. We negate the prohibition and we permit that which is permitted. It's not Hassam. We learned. You have a loan document if it's predated. So let's go back a little bit. We spoke about this many times in the past. The Talmudical system of liens and title, right? And I really can mention both at this point. Basically, the idea is any document has a noise. It has rumors going around. There's people talking in town about it, and because of that, you should know if somebody has extant documents on a specific field. If a field is stolen, the same rumor mill generates. So you should be aware if you buy a property that if there are rumors the property was stolen. The earlier the document, the higher priority you are on the rung of priorities. So if, for example, your document is dated January 1st, you bought the field, and then the guy sold the Brooklyn Bridge to the next guy on May 1st. So, well, he sold the Brooklyn Bridge, and the guy on May 1st loses it to the guy who bought it on January 1st. Let's say witnesses come and tell you that actually the guy stole the field on July of 2023, right? So, well, then it goes back to the original owner, and Mr. January 1st also loses the property. And let's say another set of witnesses come and say, well, the original owner that owned it on before July of 23, he actually borrowed money, and I don't know, in January of 23. So then we'll take it away from him and we'll give it to the creditor. And then if another creditor comes and says, well, his loan hasn't been repaid since June of 22, we'll take it away and we'll give it to June, right? Now, there's two ways to sell property. One's called achrayas and one's called shaloi b'achrayas. Achrayas is the general rule. Generally speaking, you sell property with achrayas. That means if the property is confiscated, you are required to make the buyer whole. So in this case, the first buyer, right, the guy who sold the Brooklyn Bridge, he would have to make two people whole. He would have to make the Brooklyn Bridge buyer whole, plus you'd have to make the guy who stole it, the first guy, the guy in January 23, who actually bought a stolen property, he has to make him whole, right, etc. Okay. Now, let's say I give out a loan on January of 23. Okay. However, I date the document in March of 2022. You see the problem here, right?
Mhm.
Because that now any creditors from March until March 22 until December 22 are all up the creek without a paddle, because there's no way for them to properly collect, because I ruined it for them by giving them this document. So a predated document is invalid. What about a post-dated document? You know, you're a righteous guy. It's so nice of you. You're giving more people the opportunity to collect. If I loan the guy money in January and we only write the document dated in, I don't know, December of 24, well, he loses out a year and a half worth of potential collection. So therefore, that is kosher. Okay. So the Gemara says, "Mukdaman amay psulin." 1 second. If the document was written early, why is it invalid? Meaning it's useless. It's true that you can't collect from the earlier time, so collect from the date that the loan was actually issued. Why are we invalidating the entire document? So the first opinion is Amar Shimon Lakish, you're right, it's the opinion of Rameir. Rameir says we penalize that which is permitted because of that which is prohibited. So because you wrote an early you predated the document, you lose everything. You can't collect anything from this document, not from the day where the loan was originally issued, not from the day that was written in the document, which is earlier than the loan was actually issued. Just as a side point, you could collect, just not with the power of a document. It's considered now an oral loan. So it's a loan it's an oral loan, maybe with a record or so, but it doesn't change the status of an oral loan, which means you do not have recourse against collecting property that no longer belongs to the owner. For example, if that owner had fields and he sold those fields are now called mishubadim and not b'nei chayrin. Those would be the fields the borrower still has. You can collect from fields the borrower still has. You cannot collect from fields that were sold. Okay. However, Rabbi Yehudah says a field tamer rabbanon, it could be the rabbi's opinion. What's unique about this type of document? Because you can use this potential to use this document to collect from the initial the date written in the document. So therefore, the rabbis had to invalidate it, which caused them to penalize you. It's true. You will lose everything. But the reason why you lose everything is typically we wouldn't give you penalty for everything, but there's nothing we could do here about it. What about the fact that there's a date in the documents? So because you can't validate the document, because then it gives him rights that he never had. So then he loses the rights that he has as well, because there's no way to differentiate between those two rights, between the rights he has from the date the loan was given and the rights that is written in the document from a much earlier date. So in that case, the rabbis agree. You had a very interesting story. Okay, just a little bit of background here. We'll talk about this much more as we approach Bava Basra. It's the next Masechta. It's a whole parak in Bava Basra dealing specifically with this concept. It's called Cheskes Habatim. The basic idea is as follows. Today we have title offices that are filled with documents, and some of these documents are hundreds of years old. And, the documents are kept for who knows how long, and there's multiple records and redundancies. And anytime we want to verify a transaction pertaining to property, it sort of has to be verified on the title register. If it's not there, then it doesn't exist. At least it doesn't have, even if it does exist, it doesn't have the force of law. Before all this happened, before we paid people to sit in offices and do nothing, except for those that loan with ribbis, of course, those with the desk jobs of your, what happened was you wrote a document and you were expected to keep the document for 3 years. After 3 years, it was considered too much of a burden. Why was it too much of a burden to keep a document? It's very simple. Most people didn't have floors in their house, which means that they had, besides their family, they also had a couple of other families, maybe some rats and mice and bugs and other forms of animals that would enjoy documents. And it's unfair to sort of ask the guy to manage his whole life keeping a stack of documents. So we'd allow him to dispose of the documents after 3 years. Now, what has to happen during those 3 years? He has to live on the property. So we'll have witnesses that he's been living here for 3 years. If you've been living here for 3 years, and it's known in the rumor mill that nobody's ever protested the fact that you're living here, then we allow you to, we presume that you're the legitimate owner. To point out is interesting, we're not getting into too much details here. I'm not going to mention any personal specifics, but there was a well-known Rosh Yeshiva who was forced out of a yeshiva that he felt he had the right to. He felt that the previous person who ran the yeshiva had passed away, and he felt he was the rightful inheritor. He felt the yeshiva belonged to him. And for multiple reasons, it was necessary for him to abandon the yeshiva. Combination of politics and his own personal health, and he had to leave. And he basically left it behind. He did not pursue it. But he didn't want to lose the possibility of pursuing. So it's known that every year, every 3 years, on Erev Pesach, this Rosh Yeshiva makes an announcement in a certain shul, and he protests the fact that the yeshiva doesn't belong to him. So that the people that run the yeshiva should not have a cheskes gimel shana. They shouldn't be able to be there for 3 years without protesting. Yeah. I can tell you the yeshiva is Baruch Hashem today, at least in good health. The fact that he left the issue, has improved his health, specifically his heart's health. Okay, regardless, but that's sort of the concept. So now what happened here? So he had a friend. He gave this mashkanta de surah. He gave a collateral of a property where the owner was allowed to use the collateral. The borrower gave collateral to the lender and allowed the lender to use the collateral. So the lender is now on the property for 3 years. At this point, the lender is quite a trickster. So he says to the guy, he ate for 3 years. He says to him, he says to the guy, look, I'm here for 3 years. You didn't protest. So I really can claim the property is mine. So sell it to me, or I'll claim it's mine anyway. You're going to lose it.
Rabbi, page position, please.
We are on 72a. We're 4 lines. 4 lines in the bottom, second to last words.
Thank you.
Now 3 lines in the bottom. Akne libnoi koton. So the potential victim here, he was smart, and he decided it's a very good idea. So what is he going to do? In secret, he had 2 witnesses come, and he gifted the property to his child. Then the next day, he sold it to the other guy. It's a brilliant idea. So now the actual record indicates that the second guy is basically admitting that he never bought it in the past because he wrote a new document. But in actuality, the document is totally unenforceable because he sold it the first day. He gifted it the previous day to his young son. Smart victim here. Okay. And then he sold the guy. Then they took the guy to court, and he basically undid the whole thing. The whole trap fell apart. Okay, so now here's the question. Okay, fine. The sale is undone. Good. The victim here prevented himself from being a victim. He's not a victim here. Property goes to his kid now. He wins the case. However, what about the fact that this buyer gave him money? Now he has to give back the money. Well, what type of loan is that? What category loan is that? Meaning, let's say the guy doesn't have the money anymore. Is this considered a loan document that he can collect from actual property, or it's considered an oral transaction where he cannot collect from Yishubadim? Together? So Kamil Vishtar Damu, the government Chasan Yishubadim, Ideal Kamil Valpeh Damu. it's considered an oral loan, and it does not collect from he cannot collect from property that the borrower slash seller doesn't currently have in his possession. Abaye says, is this not the same scenario as Ravasi? The Ravasi says, so Abaye points that's a very simple concept here. This document is not contested. Nobody contests the fact that the borrower, the borrower became a quote unquote seller, and that the lender became a quote unquote buyer. And therefore, it's no different than admitting to your own handwriting. In which case, if you admit that a certain document you hand wrote is yours, then you don't need to verify it, and you also get to collect from indebted property. So if it's not a contested document and everyone agrees it's true, why shouldn't it be able to serve as a legitimate document? And therefore, it's considered a loan document. So Rava says, no, not quite. This document is a farce. It should never have been written because it's totally illegitimate. The guy gifted the property to his son, and then tricks the lender into buying a property that he has no right to sell. So it's a total farce, and therefore it's not considered a legal document. Okay. Yosef Meremer. So Meremer was sitting down, and he was discussing this question. So Ravina says to him, so we can go backwards there. Let's move back to what we said a few minutes ago. We spoke about a predated document, and Rabbi Yochanan said everyone agrees here the document's invalid. Why? It's a rabbinical decree, because there's no way to differentiate the use of the document between its legitimate and its illegitimate use. So therefore, the whole thing is gone. One second, I have even a better reason. Why does Rabbi Yochanan have to have a gzeira, this decree? We have another. We're just saying here that a document that's farcical is useless, and this is a farcical document. We're claiming a loan happened at a time it never happened, and as you can imagine, the resolution is, well, it's not quite farcical, right? There's a farcical aspect to it, date, as opposed to this document, which is a Purim spiel, right? It's a Purim joke. The whole thing is as Mr. Biden would say, it's a lying dog-faced pony soldier. I think so, something like that. This whole document is completely illegitimate. It's not just one detail. That's the resolution. Okay. So why does Rabbi Yochanan say, well, the question here is how the document is going to be used? Namely, he could just say that the whole document is illegitimate. Amalei says, no, there's no comparison. It's a legitimate document. It's just that the date is invalid. This is entirely illegitimate. So now we'll get to another example. Okay, so this is another add-on to our conceptual framework of the title buying mishubodim thing. How does this work? So you sell a property, right? With achrayas means there's recourse. Okay, now the buyer, of course, went ahead and he made investments. He built the development, or he plowed the field, and he sowed the ground with potatoes or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it costs a lot of money to plant the field with potatoes. I think apparently it's about 2% of the yield goes back into the fields. So at least 2% of the potential yields. Plus, all the center pivot irrigation is very expensive. It's cheap, relatively speaking, but it costs money to install, and all these other things they cost money. So now it turns out that a creditor comes along and grabs the whole field away. Well, what about the lekech? What about the buyer? Can he recoup his investments? So the answer is he could, but it depends. With regard to the value of the actual property, that's collected from mishubodim. With regard to his investments, it can only be collected from bnei chayrin, property that is still in the domain of the seller. And why is this? Because there's no limit to investment. So it's not fair to put the onus on potential buyers because the potential liability is infinite. There's no limitation to liability. Okay, so that's the concept. Kate said, how does this work? Reuven steals a field from Shimon. He sells it to a third party. The third party, he puts investments. And now somehow it was realized that Reuven's a thief. The property is going from the third party back to Shimon. So Reuven's obviously, you can imagine Reuven's upset at Shimon. I'm sorry. The third party is upset at Reuven, the thief, and he can collect. He can collect the principal, the value of the field from any properties that Reuven has rights to or has previously sold. But the investment he only can recoup from the unrestrained property of Reuven. Reuven property that's still in Reuven's domain. Gemara says in a second over here. 1 second here. Reuven's sale to the third party was totally farcical. Reuven had no right to take the property. So therefore, how can he collect anything? The whole thing should be a joke. We should invalidate everything. You shouldn't be able to collect anything. If we're saying here that because this document was a farce, therefore you're not entitled to collect from property, only from the monies only from monies that the borrower / seller currently has. So then the same thing over here. If a guy steals a field, we're saying you collect from nechasim mishabadim. Why? Why do you collect? Why does a buyer from a thief collect from the thief's indebted assets? The document that he purchased the property is entirely a farce. It's exactly the same scenario. So the Gemara says, there's no comparison. There are two reasons why you collect from a thief, from nechasim mishabadim. Either because you don't want the thief has to lose his title of a thief, so he has to pay back his loss. I'm sorry. The reason why the thief has to reimburse the buyer is because we don't want the buyer to be looked at as a thief. In other words, people will think that the guy who actually lost the property in court is the actual thief, because we don't want. Now he didn't do anything wrong, maybe he did, but certainly he certainly didn't steal the property. Therefore, the thief has to actually take the responsibility of the thief and reimburse him. Or or because he expects him to keep to his words. So therefore, the thief has to reimburse him. Because even though it's a farcical document, we still require reimbursement. However, over here, the court recognized that the guy was, between a rock and a hard place, right? And that's why he jumped over both of them, and he sort of escaped this situation, right? The offer of the lender was basically either I'm going to lie about the field and keep it, or you're going to sell it to me for a low price. So he was stuck. There's nothing he could do. So what did he do? He played a shtick to steal, to basically to run away, to escape. And therefore, the document it's not just that it's stolen, it's the whole thing is a joke. Clearly designed to trick the guy attempting to trick him. And therefore, you're going to force the guy to verify the document. Of course, the whole thing is a joke. It's nothing to verify here. It's not a question. And therefore, you do not collect the monies from indebted property. The document is useless here. Mishnah. We spoke about this a few times before. Now we get into the meat and potatoes of it. You cannot set the price of fruit until the market has been stabilized. Yotzashar, once the market stabilized, paiskin, so you can agree to a future contract. That means that you pay now for a future delivery at the current price. The av b'she'en lazeh, even though the one who is accepting who's selling the future, he's the guy who's responsible to deliver the goods. He doesn't have any goods yet. His field hasn't yielded anything. She'ein lezeh, yesh lezeh, but it's fine because he could theoretically take the money, buy fruit immediately, and I'll have the fruit to deliver at the end of the futures contract. If, however, there hasn't been a stabilized market, then he must have the stuff in stock. We have a concept called yeshlai. He has to have it in stock, otherwise the future relationship could look like this. Let's say he's the first guy in the market space. Okay. Let's say the guy is the first to grow, to have yields. So then you can sell al hagodash, you could sell a pile of wheat. That's again yeshlai. He has it. So he can sell to you now at the current prices, any current price, because there really is no current price. So whatever they agree is the current price. For delivery at a later point in time. Or a big basket of grapes, same vessel used for olives. This is basically the potter's mixture. So they take sand or clay, whatever it is, and they mix it until they get this mixture that can later form pots. On plaster, once it was fired in a kiln, so and it's ready to be sort of applied to walls. But for fertilizer, that's the manure of his animals, he can sign a future contract at any point in the year because there's always a market. Rabbi Yosi says, you can only set prices on fertilizer if he has some amount of fertilizer to make the agreements. And the rabbis permit this. You can when they means that when they get into this agreement, they get into a large agreement. The large agreement means actually the lowest price, meaning if the price goes down. So for example, they sign a future contract in let's say May, June. He buys a pallet of blueberries, right, for delivery in January. And the price of blueberries, it started off that there were three trays for $1, and then sometime between now and January they went down to 4 trays per $1. That's what shar gavaya means. It doesn't mean the price increased, it means the quantity increased. The price actually went down. So then the price goes down. Rabbi Yehudah even if they did not. So 1 second. Rabbi Yehudah says that in a future contract, if the price goes down, then the buyer of the contract can also demand that the contract be decreased, the cost of the contract be decreased, or because he could tell him, he could say to him, 1 second. Yeah, he can tell him basically, give me back my money or give me the item now. And if you don't want to give me the item now, give me back my money. That's sort of how, so in other words, this is the way to escape from the contract. You can force the guy to deliver immediately. If you can't deliver immediately, you'd have to give you a refund, in which case you'd benefit because you could actually buy more produce at the current price.
But if he stipulates the best price. Okay.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I'll read over the article in a second. Okay, Amr Vasi, Amr Vechnan. I'll stop here.
Oh.
Tomorrow.
Yashkoa.
Okay.
Shabbos.
Not quite. Finish the Mishnah.
Hey, it's a long one.
Yeah. Okay, see you tomorrow at hour before Mincha. So 7:15 now or something? 6:15? No, it's gonna be later.
No,
Yes, it was 6:50.
Yeah, I'm sure it's gonna be somewhere around 70-ish.
6:50.